Greetings and welcome to another episode of Foundational Foundry, the tutorial series from the Foundry Roundtable. I'm your host, Green Dragoon, and with me are my co-hosts, Drogon1701,
Hello.
Mark Hockman,
Hey.
and Duncan Idaho.
Hello.
For those of you that have been following along while these have been coming out, I have to apologize. The last month has been a little crazy with big events like Star Trek Las Vegas and the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, as well as a lot of end of summer vacations. So it's actually been a while since we released the previous episode. But we are getting things back in order here, and more episodes of Foundational Foundry should be coming out more regularly. Today, though, we'll be turning our attention back to our demonstration Foundry mission. As you may recall, or may not, we were working on the ground portion where we had the players locate a crashed starship. We'll be finishing this map and setting up the transition to the crashed ship interior. Speaking of map transitions, let's get that set up now. So, I could do it so that the door itself is the is that door that we placed, but in this case, I'm choosing to have an interact with object first. So we interact with the door, and then we get the pop-up asking us if we want to go into the ship. And the reason I'm doing this is a weird little bug that has to do with replaying Foundry missions. So if you, as a player, if you drop out of a Foundry mission and then go back in, you'll actually have to go through every single map in the mission until you get to the one that you left. And it'll be this weird completed state. So it's like the map is done, but you still have to acknowledge the dialogue and go through. And this kind of helps keep it simple for the player. So they don't have to run through the map, find the door again, and just this way they can at least skip through all these maps really quickly versus having to navigate every map.
Yeah. Also, it's possible for you to break mission progression this way because of the fact that if you, say, spawn debris that blocks a hallway and your character now needs to run from the start of the mission to the other end of the hallway and the debris is in the way, you can't do that.
And generally, you can do anything that you would want to with having a particular location that you leave the map from just by having that last objective set up. So you're either interacting with a door or just finishing up in a room, and there's the implicit, or finishing up on a bridge, and there's the implication that you're going to beam, transport, walk through, do whatever. And it works just fine. So it's how specific you need. You can go all the way up to having that interact, and then just with the whole map option, you just get that pop-up, pretty much no questions asked. So yeah, that's an option I never play with, except for specifying where my mission starts in the sector block. After that, I leave the leaves from option basically alone.
All right, so I think, well, I mean, we should probably test. Make sure that everything runs smooth. So let's do a test of this map real quick. We're going to notice you've been super quiet.
Whenever you think you should test, there is no doubt you should test.
Yeah. Because recently,
there was only test.
I got cocky with just this last week with an update I made. It's like, oh yeah, I totally understand what I did there, and it turns out I broke the mission. It's just like, oh wait, no, I did not anticipate this happening this way. Oh, okay. And then I had to go back and update again.
I just realized that I completely forgot a whole entire step. We put down these pattern enhancers and never did anything with them.
They're Orions.
What were we going to do with them?
Well, we were going to set up a... we're going to do it set up as a beam out point.
So
we're going to have them do a setting up the 3 different pattern enhancers. So we get to do an interact with object which has more than one item to it. We actually get 3 objects here, and you can add more by adding this add component button.
Well, one thing with that is that if you put the objects close enough together, the player won't need to like run to each location individually. You can just kind of like stand in the middle and hit the buttons.
All right, so got those light rays on top, and we're gonna have to select them from the list here. Hopefully they're easy enough to find.
Not used to a list being that small.
Many of us build maps getting all the way up to the object limit.
All the way up to every object limit.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're placing these interactable objects in a very large, complicated map, it pays to rename them so they're easier to find in the list.
Yeah. And also, one thing to remember about naming an object is that when you're browsing through the list normally, when you're dealing with map editor, the general rule of thumb is that I think it's context up at the top and mobs and NPCs in general. Then it's building assets you've placed. And then after that, it's the detail objects you've placed. But if you've named something, it puts it to the bottom of the list. So it's an easy way of grouping objects together. Say you want to move 3 simultaneously, just because you're not quite sure where they're going to fit in, name them. So you have those off on their own. They're easy to recognize. Way at the, down at the bottom, you don't have to pick through the list because sometimes they get broken up. Some will be up here, some will be down there, even though you place those 3 together as one, basically, unit. So, and it also helps the categorization that you're like, okay, I want to move this bit up a little bit, this bit down a little bit, but wait a minute, is this the floor, the ceiling? You don't have to think about it.
All right, so I got my 3 pattern enhancers. So a bit of so I've got those 3 light rays. I'm going to actually use those. Backwards. Hang on. So I can't use the pattern enhancers as the targets because those are the things that you're placing. Kind of silly now. I'm actually going to use the light rays target. That way we interact with the light rays, which kind of are acting as indicators of where we need to place things. They're going to be
One fun thing with this type of objective is that you don't necessarily need to make it so that the object you're interacting with is actually what the player sees on the screen next to their character. I mean, because one of the more interesting things is that on some maps you'll have a bunch of baked-in consoles. You can't actually set the baked-in console as an interactable object, but you can make it so that there is an object that the player can't actually see on top of the visible console, so that the player can interact with this invisible object instead of the actual console.
all right. So let me explain real quick what I'm doing here because I'm setting up the states for the light rays. So what I want to happen is after the player defeats the Orions, talks to the ensign, The next objective is going to be to place the 3 pattern enhancers. So I have the light rays appearing as soon as the that objective becomes active or is in progress. So the light rays won't appear until then, and they're going to be our visual indicators of where the pattern enhancers need to be placed. And then what I'm going to do here is I want them to disappear again once you've interacted with that particular light ray. So I've got this objective complete and this component complete. This component complete will be for that specific object, whereas this objective complete would have been for all 3 objects. So that way we can then have the each of the pattern enhancers connected to the individual interactions of each light ray. Demonstrate that here in a sec. So progress and here, same thing. Objective in progress and one is complete. All right, so now we need the pattern enhancers because once the player interacts with a glowing light, we want it to disappear and then the pattern enhancer they just placed to appear. So we're also going to go into the state transition. This one, except this time we're going to start here and the where it goes invisible, and we're going to change that to component complete, and gives us the whole shebang. And it's on with the top one here. So when light rays is interacted with, we want it to make the pattern enhancer appear. And for this one, component complete. Light rays on making sure I'm having the correct pattern enhancer appear with the correct light ray that's being interacted with. All right, so that should be correct. Hop back in here. So I got to add a bit of. I've actually got to take out this. That is not what's going to happen next. All right, so they talk to the crewmen. After that, I want a quick pop-up dialog here. Going to be hearing away team off. So let's add a reference to player's rank. So player's rank.
Player's rank. We have learned of a large quantity of booze stored in the hold of this vessel. We need to establish pattern enhancers to be able to secure it for transports.
All right, and then the mission info.
I think later on in this series, we'll probably have an entire episode devoted to how to come up with plot. Obviously, a lot of it us do it in different ways. Some of us do it sort of on the fly as we're building the mission. We come up with the actual plot of the mission, or at least the details of it, and then some of us, plan it all out ahead of time. So there's all kinds of different ways to do it.
I can just see it now. Duncan Idaho and the quest for the hold of liqueur coming summer 2021.
The player is led by a magic floating potato.
This becomes his only in there somehow.
This is space bootlegging.
Space bootlegging, yes. The player is led on by a magic space potato, which guides him on and has witty banter and makes occasional jokes and has a tearful relationship with another crew member, and eventually the potato becomes French fries.
That reminds me.
But it is delicious.
Do we have hierarchy as Foundry contacts?
Oh, I think we've got it. Yeah, we do have a few hierarchy.
We've got a couple NPCs, don't we?
Yeah,
in the character creator, you can actually make them.
Yeah, not with the uniforms, but with if you want to make a non-standard. Yeah, and I use that a lot for non-hierarchy officers or characters. But yeah, you can make the potato aliens quite handily in Star Trek Online now. For me, has been one of the better additions of the Delta Rising expansion.
This.
Yeah, my second most frequently recurring character, or actually second or third most, would not have basically been possible without the particular just look imparted by that potato head. So at the very least, in at least the tutorial sense, it is worth sort of acclimating yourself to what's available, and there's a lot, but you can find that when planning out a particular mission, there could be just one thing, like a character or an asset or an environment, that really just sort of takes hold of you, that you really want to sort of, you want to make a mission around this, because that's, that you think is an interesting aspect or an interesting asset. You want to do a little bit more with that. So missions can definitely take shapes in a variety of ways, and I guess the only way to really sort of tackle it when just starting off is just to look around a little bit. Maybe not comprehensively, but just enough that you get sort of a feel for it. Then you start working around. You're like, oh, what if I place this next to this? And something generally takes shape. So definitely feel free to experiment.
I realize I'm not writing the most eloquent dialogue, but it's enough to give directions.
And for our purposes as a tutorial, it can be, fairly Packlet-esque dialogue.
I don't think it's that bad.
Oh, I'm just regretting the fact that we didn't spend that first episode just making a bunch of Packlet officers.
No, that was our first live stream.
Yeah.
Long time ago. Yeah, first live mission we made, we invented a Packlet ambassador. It was awesome.
That was kind of fun.
That officer ended up going on to being first context specialist on AEI. All right, for reals this time, I think I haven't forgotten anything.
Okay.
Right. I've done the surface, scan the air. Ooh, got the wrong tricorder. Detecting the ship. Northeast.
Well, one thing I found that's useful is that when you're doing a mission test play, it's not necessarily a good idea to return to the editor the first time you find a single minor thing that needs to be changed. Sometimes it's best to do a full playthrough and make a list of things that you're going to change later.
Okay, so I can probably shrink that reach marker a little bit. We're still pretty far out. It's always really kind of hard to judge distances. Editor. Ask error. That's different. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I forgot to hook up our Orions.
Ooh, yeah.
The funny thing about this sort of format that we've chosen to do these tutorials in is that we're actually doing them live. If you're watching us later, we actually do these live sort of in the course of our regular shows, most of the time every Wednesday. So you're going to see the process like it is, completely unedited. You'll see us make mistakes. You'll see us forget things because, that's what a real Foundry author is going to be doing, no matter how experienced you are.
Yeah. Even on your 10th mission, you can completely break something.
Yes.
Nope, I definitely emphatically claim to be not perfect. All right, so let's reduce that down. Let's take 30.
I definitely also emphatically claim that Green Dragoon is not perfect.
Well, as long as we're in agreement. All right. Oh, and I had to change the tricorder. That was the other thing. It would be nice if they labeled it. All right, take two.
Watch, Zero is going to add some incredibly complex label to specify which one's Klingon and which one's Federation.
I mean, recently, Laughing Trendy community manager commented that she watches a ton of podcasts. I kind of wonder if she watches ours at all.
She probably does.
Hard to say.
Are you going to start trying to lead things out there? Like, oh, it would be cool if you're... Yeah, I'm actually not sure how to do that. But basically just kind of put little... I don't want to call it traps or anything like that. Just like this might get her to respond and acknowledge the fact that we exist.
And to the
you start
Laughing
setting
Trendy,
traps
who
like,
may or may not be secretly listening.
Start setting traps like, if they don't add this label for us, obviously they hate puppies.
Not that kind of trap, because then that's just like,
Yeah.
I'd say go. Oh, the word it's looking for is goading them into a response.
There you go.
But not necessarily in an
antagonistic.
antagonistic.
Antagonism is bad.
Yeah, not antagonistically, but cleverly.
Cleverly.
All right.
I don't have the wit to do that, but I can imagine the possibility. First
All right,
stage
that
of
works pretty well.
science.
Hi, Orions, or I would kill you. I'm just going to have to punch her to death.
Eventually you'll get a weapon drop.
I still basically will use the kill target button, because combat difficulty is something really hard to get a sense out of unless you've fully developed your Foundry character.
Which
So
only
I'll
Mark
generally...
has ever done.
Yeah, I think in total. I still haven't heard of anyone else going at least that far with it.
Well, my Foundry character got to level 60 because of the fact that I actually got most of her levels from doffing.
But you need to get to that point, though. That's still pretty difficult.
It's not that difficult.
If you're just killing miscellaneous Orion mobs, let's just say.
All right, so I know what the task area is now. I forgot to hook up the talk to contact to this specific contact.
Yeah.
But I can test the placing the pattern enhancer. That seems to be working pretty well.
Huzzah.
The hardest level for a Foundry character is always level 1.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just noticing that their rank I'm being referred to as cadet. That's just to add insult to injury.
Yeah, it's kind of funny with just the dialogue on my Foundry character, because for the purposes of my fleet, I've labeled my Foundry character Foundry Duncan to specify I'm in the Foundry now.
Because people can't see you when you're in your Foundry test character.
And I've gotten fleet invites, just randomly. It's just people trolling along, just seeing, hey, who's logging in this open zone.
Did you accept?
I think it's no, because it's a Foundry character that wasn't even level 1.
Yeah, but you gotta wonder what happens if you try to accept. I'm sure it'll kick out some error.
All of my efforts to have joined the fleet have thus far failed.
I kind of figure, because I mean, they're kind of in their own little separated off instance, so it's not like they can coexist with anybody else.
But it does at least allow for some, just based on the fact that you can name this character for just basically testing purposes. Anyway, in dialogue, my character is referred to as Cadet Foundry Duncan, which is, it doesn't work, but you just sort of tune it out after a while.
Okay, so that's about it. I think we've fixed our missing contact here, so it's now correctly hooked up to the ensign. She'll give her whole spiel. I think that's about it for the ground portion of the mission. So I think this is a good stopping point. We've got our map transition set up, and we finished all the interactions for this map. Next week, we will dive into the interior of the crashed starship, where we will look at working with interior maps. So stay tuned. Until then, we will finish by wishing everyone good night.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Good night.